What is more effective, stick or carrot? Believe in hell or in heaven? Believe in a merciful, forgiving God or believe in a wrathful, punishing God? In other words, believe in what kind of deities could prevent our ancestors from misbehaving. In his book, Big Gods: How Religion Transformed Cooperation and Conflict, published by Princeton University in 2013, a psychology professor in the University of British Columbia, Ara Norenzayan, asks similar questions. So let's try to think why people need big, omniscient and omnipotent punishing deities, and what might happen if other secular institutions will take over their function. Back in 2018, I had a correspondence with Steven Pinker, and he advised me to pay attention to works of Ara Norenzayan. Since then, I've read many of his articles and indeed found them very intriguing. Norenzayan is one of the leading scholars in the field of evolutionary regions of religion and the psychology of religious diversity. For example, I'd like to recommend watching this fascinating interview with Dr. Norenzayan. The link will be in the description. If you are interested in the psychology of religion and the evolution of morality, it is a must-see material. His book Big Gods covers a wide range of topics and research describing how psychology and other social sciences attempt to study the phenomenon of religion. For example, Norenzayan writes that the entire argument of this book can be summarized in 8 interrelated principles. Watch people are nice people, religion is more in the situation than in the person, hell is stronger than heaven, trust people who trust in God, religious actions speak louder than words, unworshipped gods are impotent gods, big gods for big groups, and religious groups cooperate in order to compete. But in this review, I'll discuss mainly the third principle, that hell is stronger than heaven. For example, Norenzayan is trying to answer how did human societies scale up from tight-knit groups of hunter-gatherers to the large anonymous cooperative societies of today. How did organized religions with big gods spread to colonize most minds in the world? He makes the surprising argument that these fundamental puzzles about the origins of civilization answer each other. For hundreds of thousands of years, we lived in small groups where we knew everyone. But eventually we began to create large settlements. And here our brains were forced to deal with outsiders. And in order to reduce the level of anxiety and violence, we were forced to rely on religion. To provide safety for large-scale cooperation, we needed the idea of gods or supernatural forces that are constantly watching over us and punishing us for bad behavior. That is, the question of mutual trust between us and strangers is fundamental here. Therefore, in their work, Norenzayan and his colleagues try to understand what exact role our gods must play to address the needs of large communities. They claim that belief in hell is stronger than belief in heaven. For the purposes of social evolution, it was necessary for us to believe not in forgiving gods, but in punishing gods. In the past, deities of our ancestors were very local. They were not omnipotent and they were not particularly concerned with moral issues. But as soon as we began to unite in large communities and began to deal with strangers, we had to reconstruct our gods and endow them with omnipotence and omniscience. Such heavenly police have allowed societies to grow while maintaining safety and order. Authors claim that societies with punishing deities succeeded in competition with other more divided groups of people. In other words, there probably was a strong evolutionary social need and functionality in such adaptation. After all, before that, we mostly rely on the concept of gods to explain natural phenomena, like white rains or white tsunamis, earthquakes, etc. Our first gods were not concerned with moral issues, but later it changed, and there is a reason why it changed. Another important question Norenzayan is asking is why do people devote precious time and resources to their deities at a significant cost to themselves? Why are many religious behaviors and rituals so extravagant from evolutionary perspective? And how do they work to build trust and transmit passionate faith? He claims that several psychological tricks were packaged together over time to galvanize trust among strangers. Since belief is easy to fake, it opens the door to imposters who masquerade as believers and who might receive group benefits but do not contribute, and worse, exploit the system. And of course, groups that are invaded by imposters would collapse quickly. That is why one of the most pressing threats that any religious groups must combat is the threat of religious hypocrisy. And here, rituals play a crucial role. To make sure that members of our group are sincere, they must prove through self-sacrifice that they deserve to be a part of that group and thus verify their commitment. They must publicly demonstrate their devotion. Norenzayan claims that such self-sacrificial rituals have a very practical function. It helps to provide mutual trust. At the same time, it raises other important questions. How far does the religious circle of trust extend? Where does it collapse? And what can this tell us about prejudice against atheists? Norenzayan dedicates a significant part of his book to the existent prejudice in many societies against non-believers. And maybe in the future I'll dedicate a separate review to that topic, but now I'd like to return to the claim that hell is stronger than heaven. Norenzayan, along with his colleague Azim Sharif, conducted several studies that show that if it is possible to resort to deception and fraud, then those who believe in a punishing Almighty God were much less likely to deceive than believers in a kind, forgiving deity. They claim they have captured a mechanism that cultural evolution had been exploiting for thousands of years, that punishing gods make people behave nice. Sorry, in this review I won't go into details of methodology applied. For details you'll need to read the book. It relies on many psychological experiments. When discussing economic contracts and engagement in long-distance trade in the past, Norenzayan claims that one powerful tool, although certainly not the only one, no doubt was a credible fear of a God who knows and monitors moral behavior and doles out rewards and punishments. Sincere belief in a supernatural monitor is like agreeing to be followed by a powerful judge 24/7, 365 days a week. In addition, while human judges are prone to error and costly to the system, a supernatural judge is fail-safe and comes for free. Strangers who show sincere belief in being monitored were therefore more likely to be invited to join these networks and were trusted more. If people trust each other even when no one is monitoring them, then human monitoring mechanisms, which are costly and difficult to enforce, can be supplemented and reinforced with supernatural monitoring. This brings us to the fourth principle of big gods: trust people who trust in God. The researchers ran an experiment that demonstrated that people who believe in supernatural punishment and are constantly reminded about it will commit less crime compared to those who believe in a merciful God. They even conclude that people who are reminded that their God is forgiving God could be pushed to commit immoral actions. After all, why resist temptation if a kind and merciful God will forgive you anyway? Another point that has been studied is how often people are to punish free riders, or their bad neighbors, or lazy co-workers. In short, it appears that belief in supernatural punishment has reduced the motivation for earthly forms of costly punishment. People that believe in punishing deities would be kinder to their bad neighbors, believing that violators will get their karma. For more on this, see section The Puzzle of Big Gods and the study about comparison of different cantons in Switzerland. Considering various experimental data, the researchers decided to test whether belief in hell, or punishment from above, and belief in heaven, or benevolence from above, have different consequences for the level of crime in a given country. They compared national rates of various crimes, such as robbery, murder, rape, and human trafficking. Then they looked at the percentage of the population that believes in heaven, hell, and God. And they found out that what really mattered is in what kind of God people believe in. Nations with the highest level of belief in hell had lower crime rates. In contrast, countries that preferred heaven to hell were crime champions. And those patterns persisted in almost all major religious denominations, including various Christian, Hindu, and syncretic religions. But according to Azim Sharif, belief in heaven is also important, especially in places where people still cannot afford luxury. And if you want to attract new converts in poor countries, it's much easier to offer a religion that promises a divine paradise after death than a religion that threatens believers with hellfire and suffering. Overall, if we proceed to the conclusions, the belief in hell makes people be good, while the belief in heaven makes them feel good. At the same time, in countries where believers prefer heaven to hell, there are more crimes. Some may say that it doesn't make sense. Believe in a kind and merciful God must encourage pro-social behavior and reduce the desire to punish your neighbor, but in reality it is the opposite. What confirms Norenzayan's assumption that watched people are nice people. At the same time, he argues, again relying on a lot of research cited in the book, that there is another secular road towards nice behavior, effective institutions that encourage cooperation and high level of trust. Here I'd like to bring your attention to this interesting book that I highly recommend, Why Nations Fail: The Origins of Power, Prosperity and Poverty. Norenzayan doesn't mention this book, but I personally see parallels here. Norenzayan writes, "We know that supernatural monitoring is far from the only source of prosociality in the world. Secular authorities have joined and perhaps supplanted watchful gods as guarantors of cooperation in some places. Economists and sociologists consistently find that people living in societies with strong secular institutions compared to those living in societies with weak institutions are far more trusting of other citizens, more prosocial, and more likely to punish free riders." In other words, he claims that in such secular societies, not only atheists but also theists are motivated to behave prosocially, and it has nothing to do with religion. There are strong institutions that govern public life, and if people are reassured that contracts are enforced, competition is fair, and cheaters will be punished, levels of trust and cooperation are high for everyone, believers and non-believers alike. And it appears that believers who do live in such secular societies with strong rule of law are influenced by this fact. And for them, the idea that religion is necessary for morality is not as compelling. As a result, they are not as driven to distrust atheists. As I've mentioned before, one of the questions that the author is concerned with is the level of trust towards non-believers. Data demonstrates that in some parts of the world, such as Northern Europe, especially Scandinavia, government institutions have precipitated religion's decline by usurping its community-building functions. These societies with atheist majorities, some of the most cooperative, peaceful and prosperous in the world, climbed religion's ladder and then kicked it away. In such places, even believers do not associate religion with morality. Therefore, in such countries, the level of trust in atheists is much higher. Norenzayan writes, "We found that all else being equal, believers from countries with a firmly established secular rule of law showed markedly reduced distrust of atheists compared to believers from countries with weak secular rule of law. In other words, these findings say that two equally fervent believers express different level of distrust towards atheists depending on whether they live in a society with strong or weak rule of law." In conclusion, it seems as if religions where the deity controls not only with carrots but also with sticks, which involves punishment for disobedience, have probably significantly helped us in certain situations to maintain order within our group. We trust strangers if they believe in supernatural forces that punish for bad behavior. It also helped with international trade. But of course, if we discuss intergroup relations, then religion can often divide and provoke conflict and hostility. At the same time, if there are institutions that ensure social equality, justice and security, then religion can rely less on punishment. In other words, the function of religion and its supernatural forces could be replaced by the resources of secular institutions and technologies. In such societies, we may see how religious institutions switch their focus and functions and start playing a different role. Finally, many claims in the book aren't new, but Norenzayan provides experimental data that confirms these claims. And yet, please remember to approach all the information critically. All claims are not absolute. Yes, they are educated guesses of experts based on experimental data, but please be open to other interpretations and keep searching. Also remember to check this amazing interview. My friends, if you liked the video and would like to see more such reviews, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. Also, if you like what I do, please support my channel for Patreon or one-time donation. Thank you, and I wish you peace and health wherever you are.